Son. Oh, I got it right. Marvellous. And Matthew McGregor is here, Chief Executive of the British campaign group 38 Degrees, former advisor to Barack Obama.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Kamala Harris has called Donald Trump to congratulate him on winning the US presidential election. Donald Trump's promised to oversee the golden age of America. These Democrats in Edinburgh told LBC it's a bitter pill to swallow.
The American electorate has let down the rest of the world twice in the last 8 years. I feel bad for Ukraine, for example.
I'm very lucky because I'm quite old. I'm not going to live to see the day that things turn around, but I think it's going to take a long time.
Trump's success comes despite a felony conviction, 4 criminal prosecutions and charges over the January the 6th insurrection. Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davies says he's concerned about his attitude to Russia.
President-elect Trump praised Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And I quote, he called it genius. He also said he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to NATO allies.
Well, President Zelensky's congratulated the president-elect, and stay with LBC for all the latest analysis and reaction. Elsewhere today, another case of Mpox has been found in the UK. The patient's being treated in a hospital in London. And police are investigating a night of violent disorder in Scotland. Fireworks were thrown at police officers and cars in Edinburgh. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed down 5 points at 81.66. The pound buys $1.28 and €1.20. LBC weather largely cloudy in the south tonight, clear skies in the far north and a low of 5 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 2 minutes past 8. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. It's not just America that's in the news tonight. Some breaking news from Germany. Their Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has sacked Christian Lindner, his finance minister, after he proposed snap elections as a means of ending the crisis in Germany's governing coalition. You may want to ask a question on that. We'll try and get a report on that a little bit later in the programme. But joining me on the panel for the next hour are Bonnie Greer, the playwright and author, who was born and grew up in America, Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
Southside, like Michelle Obama.
Lionel Barber is a journalist, author and broadcaster who's a former editor of the Financial Times and now co-hosts the Media Confidential podcast with Alan Rusbridger and is the author of the new book, Gambling Man, The Wild Ride of Japan's Masayoshi Son. Matthew McGregor is chief executive of the British campaign group 38 Degrees, who is a digital strategist for Barack Obama's 2012 presidential election campaign. We were hoping to have Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes with us, but she has pulled out at the last minute. So we haven't got a Trump representative on the panel. There is no conspiracy about that. We had intended to have one. So we'll see what we can do about that anyway.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
And, of course, you can watch us on Global Player. Stephen is our first caller in East Grinstead. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, good evening to you, Iain. Good evening, panel. Now Donald Trump has won. How special will a UK-US special relationship be?
It's a good question.
Bonnie just whispered, that's a good question. It is a good question because there are so many different aspects of this. I suppose, Lionel Barber, you could say it'll be a special relationship if he imposes 20% tariffs on the EU, but not us.
Well, we'll be lucky to get away with no tariffs, but the special relationship, as you say, is built on a number of foundations, but the key point, which I do not think is affected, is the close cooperation between the intelligence services. We have still top-rank capacity there, and I don't think that's disturbed. Where we have shot ourselves, or not we, actually, Iain, we didn't do anything. It was the Labour Party that sent over people to help the Kamala Harris campaign, went to the Democratic convention. It wasn't election interference, as Donald Trump says per se, but it was extremely unwise. And some of the Twitter accounts of people in and around Downing Street, I think, should be scrutinised. They've not made it easier for Keir Starmer as he seeks to build a relationship with the new president. And by the way, man to watch, David Lammy. I think he's definitely shoots from the lip.
Well, we've got a question on him in a minute, so let's not go too far down that road. Bonnie Greer, look, you've lived in this country for decades now. This whole phrase special relationship, it irritates the hell out of me. Does it irritate the hell out of you?
Yeah, because it's sentimental and it doesn't mean anything, really. It's a World War II holdover. Most Americans have never heard of it. I don't think I'd be surprised if they did. And as Lionel says, it's a lot to do with the services and so forth coming together. It's more ceremonial than anything else. I think being Trump largely a transactional guy, he's going to transact this too. He's going to see what he's going to get out of it. And it may not be a lot.
What do you think he wants to get out of it?
The UK to say yes to everything he wants, to be there for him, like his new girlfriend. And when he decides he's going to make his move on Ukraine, he wants the UK to be America's mouthpiece.
I thought you were going to say when he made his move on his new girlfriend.
On Ukraine, he's going to want Britain to be his mouthpiece, mainly because most Americans can understand what most British people say, so he doesn't have to translate it. But that's what he's going to want in exchange.
Matthew McGregor.
I think the relationship will be as special as Donald Trump wants it to be. But I just want to stand up for the relationship between Britain and the United States. I'm a dual citizen, so maybe I'm a bit biased. Americans hold the UK in great affinity, and just as Americans do, just as Brits do with the US. There are a lot of common interests, not just on policy, but culturally and far beyond. A lot won't change about that. Those binds, those historic ties will remain in place despite these ebbs and flows. As we saw between 2016 and 2020, a lot of the professional relationships remained in place, a lot of the cultural relationships remained in place. So I think that the relationship can withstand some of the turbulence that we'll see over the next few years.
Matthew, can I just say something in respect? Sorry, Ian.
Okay.
I'm dual national too. I agree with you. You and I would agree with this. All of us at this table would agree. What we've learned from last night is that there's another America out there, and maybe that is the America. And I'm saying that most Americans don't know anything about this, don't know what it means, and they're going to follow Trump's lead. If Trump says quid pro quo, put your money on the table, that's what they're going to expect from us. They're not sentimental about the United Kingdom other than to visit on a holiday.
And on the special relationship, Ian, do not bet the farm, excuse the pun, on a bilateral trade deal. I think that this is, first of all, it's got to pass Congress, but this is a bit of a pipe dream, I'm afraid. And even if they do begin negotiations, serious negotiations, Trump will extract an extremely high price.
Because the previous government were negotiating trade deals with individual states, weren't they? And I think they got quite a few of those.
That's how you do it. Yeah.
Only a little bit extra from what they already had with the EU in.
But I don't know if the current government's continuing with that. But I'd rather agree with you. I think it's unlikely there'll be a sort of major trade deal, because I suspect Trump's demands might be ones that we wouldn't want to meet. Let's take another call. This relates to what you were saying earlier about David Lammy, Lionel. It's from Luke in Orpington. Luke, very good evening. What would you like to say?
Hi, good evening. Firstly, ecstatic and we're relieved about the results for America. So that's great. My question is, David Lammy was, he blasted Donald Trump as a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Does that make him and his role now untenable as Foreign Secretary?
Well, to give David Lammy's full quote from 2018, he referred to Donald Trump as a woman-hating, neo-Nazi, sympathising sociopath and also a profound threat to the international order. Now, presumably, Keir Starmer knew that David Lammy had said this when he appointed him Foreign Secretary. It was hardly a secret at the time. I think he said various other things about Donald Trump, particularly on his LBC show when he was hosting that on a Sunday morning. Bonnie Greer, should that have ruled him out, as Luke is suggesting, ruled him out of being in the role of Foreign Secretary?
I think in the real world, and I like David very much, I think he should approach the Prime Minister and ask him what he should do. Because this is not funny anymore. And Donald Trump is a vengeful dude. And if he ever saw this, it would be hell. He's already done it once to a Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, and he can do it again. If I was David, I would go to the Prime Minister and say, what should I do?
Sorry, who did he do it to before?
I think you mean the ambassador.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The ambassador. But if it was me, I would knock on the door and say, look, I did say this. What do I do?
So you don't think that Keir Starmer was aware of this when he appointed him?
Maybe not.
If he was, I mean, he surely has to stand by his Foreign Secretary.
Well, Keir Starmer was like me and thinking America was going to elect Donald Trump again.
But I think I'm right in saying that Keir Starmer has said that David Lammy will be there for the full term of the first Labour government. So he's dug himself a hole there.
Well, he should be there, but I'm talking about Donald Trump, and we all know Donald Trump. And if he saw this, he would not be happy.
Somebody, though, when he and Keir Starmer had their 2-hour dinner with Donald Trump in September in Trump Tower, one of his people will have told him about this, surely, and presumably they got over it at that dinner. You'd like to think that was the case, Matthew.
They got on very well at that dinner, by all accounts. I mean, part of the point here, leaving aside diplomacy, what David Lammy said is objectively a factual statement.
Exactly.
And most people in this country are very upset and disappointed.
Well, he's not. I think to say he's neo-Nazi sympathising. I mean, I'm not a fan of his, but I don't think I would go that far.
He said very fine people on both sides of the Charlottesville neo-Nazi rally.
Sure did.
That is something that I think shouldn't be forgotten. He's not a neo-Nazi, but saying there are very fine people at a rally where people were talking about replacement theory and had all kinds of anti-Semitic slogans is something that people shouldn't just wipe the slate clean for Donald Trump on. And most people in this country are disappointed by the fact that he's been re-elected. Donald Trump respects strength.
I think they are among the metropolitan elite.
No,
but
there are polls today saying 60% of people are disappointed by this result.
Well, I'm not sure that's reflected in the phone calls that we've been getting all day.
Maybe it's so. I think there's an additional point, which is Donald Trump respects strength, and kicking David Lammy to the curb out of a fear that he'll be upset is not something that would be demonstrating strength. They got on at the dinner. Donald Trump is very transactional. I think it would be a sign of real weakness for Keir Starmer to move him anytime soon.
The leader of the opposition today stood up and pointed this quote out in the presence of the Foreign Secretary. The Prime Minister heard it, and they have to decide, what should happen. But we do know that Donald Trump is a vengeful guy, and he wouldn't like it.
I think Bonnie's got the perfect solution. David Lammy can knock on the door, and he can present the facts, what he said, and then Keir Starmer said, thank you, I've noted that, and he could keep him. So he doesn't immediately fold. But there is a wider lesson here. If you are going to become the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, that is a diplomatic job. And what David Lammy said, and you quoted, Iain, is not diplomatic. It may have strong elements of truth, and it does go back to Charlottesville, where, by the way, there were several officials, senior officials in the Trump White House who left shortly afterwards because they were so disgusted with what he'd said, where he equivocated rather than overtly supported those neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia.
OK, well, we have a brilliant question next, but we are going to take a break before we come to it. It's from Keith in Upminster. Hold your fire, Keith. It's 8:15.
This is LBC. These apply. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Bonnie Greer, Lionel Barber and Matthew McGregor with us answering your questions. Lots of them coming in, 0345 6060 973. Now, here's a corker from Keith in Upminster. I built you up, Keith. Don't let me down.
Okay, Ian. Which war leader is going to benefit most from their relationship with Trump? Would it be Netanyahu, Putin, Kim Jong-un, or someone else?
Great question. Matthew?
All of the above, perhaps. I mean, Donald Trump is a very laissez-faire guy when it comes to letting authoritarian leaders do whatever they like, and he said that repeatedly during the course of this election campaign. And Donald Trump is someone who says what he's going to do and then does it. So I think that this was a tremendous result for Netanyahu. It's a tremendous result for Putin. I think Kim Jong-un is a little harder to read and a little less predictable. But I think this is a really, really worrying time for the Ukrainians, and I think it will continue to be an incredibly desperate time for Palestinians and the Lebanese.
Just to expand a bit more on Vladimir Putin, because I can see why what you said about Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu definitely would feel that he's got more of an ally in the White House with Trump. But, I mean, Putin apparently has already written him a private congratulatory note. Why do you think Putin could benefit from Trump being president?
I think because Trump is the Western leader who is utterly uncommitted to Ukrainian victory. And I think it's as simple as that. I think that Putin has felt and has clearly stated that he's able to manipulate Trump during his first term. They've apparently been in private contact while Trump has been out of office. And Putin acts in his own self-interest. Russia has again interfered in this election, calling in bomb hoaxes to polling stations in Georgia and elsewhere. Their self-interest is evidence for Putin's delight about the election result.
Lionel?
I think the question or the answer is somewhat nuanced. Netanyahu is a beneficiary because Trump's big foreign policy success in his first term, widely recognized, was the Abraham Accords, where there was diplomatic recognition and closer commercial ties between the Emiratis, the Emirates, and Morocco and Israel. And he wants to build on that to get a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which, as one American friend of mine described, as putting Wall Street together with Silicon Valley. I mean, the technology meets the money. And that is the big prize. The issue, though, is whether Trump is prepared to go along with what some people in the Israeli government see as an opportunity, a window, having taken out Nasrallah, having smashed Hamas, killed Sinwar, the leader, to go for Iran's nuclear program. This would be a tremendous risk, obviously, but they think they've got Iran on the run. Now, Trump is not a warmonger. I don't think he wants to start a war, but will he say no to Bibi if Bibi pushes that? So overall, it's positive for Netanyahu. He treated basically Biden as if he wasn't there. I mean, the Americans turned up in the Middle East to sort of show they cared rather than to show they mattered. So let's be clear about that. On Kim Jong-un, it's not a win. I mean, Trump still thinks he's Rocket Man and was annoyed, furious that he couldn't do a deal with him. And he's got a deal with the North Koreans in Russia, who are fighting now in Ukraine. I think, lastly, on Ukraine, I'm not convinced that Trump...
Before you go down that road, that's the next question.
Okay.
So hold your fire on that one.
Let me just say that I don't think that Trump just sells Ukraine down the river and Zelensky down the river. When you talk about victory, Matthew, frankly, they're seriously hurting right now. I don't think victory on Zelensky's terms is possible. He'll want to have a ceasefire.
That is the next question.
Yeah, okay,
so
sorry.
Let's get that question on air. Yeah. John is in Luton. Hello, John.
Oh, you didn't ask.
Thanks very much. My question is simply, how vulnerable is Ukraine and associated European countries next to the Ukraine border? Now Trump has won, considering his slight less interest in NATO.
Right. Lionel, you continue talking about Ukraine, and then I'm going to come to Bonnie. She's just pointed out I didn't come to.
I'll be brief because Bonnie's got to come in here. I mean, first, I don't see him cutting off Ukraine, just selling Ukraine down the river. What he wants is to get to a ceasefire, which could then lead to an armistice. They're going to lose territory. They won't take Korea and Crimea, and they'll lose territory in the east. I think that's very difficult for them given the reluctance of America. They've been 6 months, a year too late on all the weapons supplies. It's been self-deterrence. I'd give Biden a low mark for his performance in the Ukraine conflict. So I think Trump is looking at a kind of Korea armistice style solution where it's a sort of ceasefire, frozen conflict.
Is this something, though, sort of expanding this a little bit, that the Europeans could say, OK, well, Donald Trump, we hear what you say. If you won't provide what they need, we are going to.
They don't have the capacity to do that.
OK.
They don't have the advanced weaponry. They don't have the satellite targeting for the long-range missiles. We are, I'm afraid, a junior partner in this. What we need to do is actually strengthen the eastern flank and actually start spending some serious money on equipment and cooperating amongst ourselves, because we're in a very tight spot now, because Trump is going to really ratchet up pressure on the Europeans.
And I thought it was interesting today at Prime Minister's Questions, Kemi Badenoch made that very point that, well, she was putting pressure on Keir Starmer to commit to 2.5% of GDP. I think it's going to have to go way above 2.5%. Right, Bonnie, let's go back to the first question there about which foreign leader do you think benefits from Trump becoming president?
Well, I'm going to go second tier on this and say none of the above. He's going to go down to the second tier. I think he really likes Viktor Orban. I think he likes the guy who runs Turkey. He's going to, remember, Trump is from television, so he's going to want to grow his own dictator. These other guys around the table, they've got power. He's going to want to make his own person. And he likes Viktor Orban a lot. He's been to Mar-a-Lago.
Well, Viktor Orban, to be fair to him, is not a dictator.
No, but nevertheless, he's going to keep his eye on him. Well, he was elected.
He was elected.
And I know the question, but I'm saying that Trump is going to make his own group of people, and he's not going to be looking at those people, I don't think, at all.
OK, Matthew, on Ukraine.
I take the point that Ukraine is in a tough place. But the interesting thing for me is the split between where Europe has stated out a position of full support for Ukraine, and there is now a split between where America is and where the rest of Europe is. And I think that's a real worry. I think it's going to put pressure on European leaders to try and make their own solutions. Really interesting comments from French MPs last week saying we can't allow European security to be decided once every 4 years by voters in Wisconsin. And I think there is going to be an increasing concern from European capitals, of which London is it should be one, of saying, are we doing enough? Is Europe secure? And can we rely on America into the medium and long term?
Matthew, there's no consensus in Europe for admitting Ukraine into NATO. That's a fact.
Not when it's at war. It can't do it because NATO is defensive.
Or even afterwards.
Yeah, it just can't, unfortunately.
And the fact that Donald Trump has now got another 4 years, and presumably, we can't assume this, but it's a reasonable idea to suggest that Vance will be the next president after Trump. Unless the Democrats really do get their act together, we might come on to that a bit later if there's a question on it. But the whole sort of anti-NATO, isolationist approach, I don't think we can assume that's going to disappear over the next few years, can we, Bonnie?
No, not at all. And isolationism is very much a part of the American scene. It always has been. I mean, practically, it took America being bombed by the Japanese to get into World War II, even though there were subs around the East Coast and people knew what was going on. So America never likes to get into what they call foreign wars unless they can see something that they need to do. The whole thing that our generation, my generation, was brought up on, this sort of heroic America rushing in to help Europe, was never the idea. We were pushed and dragged into that. And all the wars that we've been involved with, it has to be that way. America doesn't like foreign excursions.
I don't think, but be careful here, but I don't think it's right to talk about Trump being an isolationist. He's going to be very engaged in the Middle East. He's going to really try for that Israel-Saudi deal. I think he'll have to engage with the Chinese. He's got a real problem about managing Taiwan. Is he going to build on the AUKUS military arrangements with Australia and the UK? Is he going to build on the new relationship which Biden cultivated, South Korea, Japan? That's all engagement. But the thing is, he's not interested in Europe.
He's transactional, Lionel. That's what I meant. It's not the way American foreign policy has been before. If you think about Joe Biden, if you think about all of them, it's always been about America's position in the world, how we're positioned. Trump is going to see a quid pro quo. What do we get out of it? Why should we be there? Why should we be in the Pacific? What are we getting out of it? Why should we defend anything when we have to take care of ourselves? And each nation will have to, France, I just suddenly came to my head, will have to demonstrate what its relationship with the United States means for the United States.
And with Trump, it's a lot of quids, not much quo.
That's right.
Indeed. I can't remember who it was I was talking to yesterday about Rick Grenell, who could well be the new Secretary of State. In fact, I'm reliably informed by a listener to this programme who's met him that he fully expects to be. Now, he was the former ambassador to Germany and apparently was sent to Germany to duff up the Germans, which, as an ambassador,
correct.
Your role is as a diplomat, and yet he was sent there just to spike Angela Merkel's tail.
That's exactly right. And he did it.
And he did it very well.
But see, Trumpy, I call him Trump. I do, because it's just too much.
Is that a sign of affection? No,
it isn't. It's like I'm a New Yorker, and that's what we call him. And anyway, Trump sends people out to do things, okay? The ambassador, the foreign secretary is not out to strengthen relationships. He's going to be out there on assignment. Shake down somebody or find out what's going on. It's not going to be a diplomatic thing at all. He doesn't believe in that.
Yeah, I think that the chaos that Trump brings is going to keep the British government on tenterhooks the whole time, and that is going to be an incredible distraction for Keir Starmer's government. He's still new, cabinet ministers are still new, Labour's been out for so long, they're still finding their feet. I think that distraction is going to be really quite damaging to Labour, even if the policies aren't.
Here's a radical thought for you all. Nigel Farage is ambassador to Washington, D.C. It sounds a ludicrous idea, but there is a certain logic to it, isn't there, Lionel?
It's not entirely stupid. Trump, I say this, and it's not just because Nigel Farage went to my old school.
Oh, well.
They all stick together, these private school boys.
Yeah, time could go. No, look, if he did go, he'd have to, Starmer won't do it.
No way.
But somebody needs to be there who kind of gets Trump.
Yeah.
If you're going to pick up the right political signals.
Well, see, they've actually got an ambassador there at the moment, Dame Karen Pierce, who I think is superb.
Yeah.
She was appointed by Boris Johnson and therefore will be seen as anathema to the new government.
Which is wrong, because she's
it is very wrong. Very wrong.
Nigel Farage is the after-dinner act at Mar-a-Lago. He's the waiter with the English accent. Listen, I'm serious.
Ferrero Rocher.
Exactly. This guy is the one. That's what he is, as far as Trump is concerned.
Trump loves him.
Of course he loves him, because
so therefore, shouldn't Starmer be transactional as well?
Starmer couldn't send that guy over there to represent the British government. That would be crazy. He can't do that. No, he's the waiter at the table. He's the one with the jokes. If he wants to send him over there like that, that's fine. But that's about what use he is, as far as
I've just had another inspiration.
Oh, what?
You.
Me as the ambassador from this country?
You're up for it, aren't you? I can tell. Matthew.
I think that there were some rumours before during the summer about Peter Mandelson, David Miliband. I think they shouldn't wait by the phone anymore. I actually do think there's a lot to be said for keeping the current ambassador, who has done a fantastic job and has built really strong relationships. I don't think it's necessary to rush into a replacement. I think we need to wait and see how this develops.
I will never hear a word said against Karen Pierce, because she hosted a book launch for my American President's book last year. A fine woman. But I think, you see, the Foreign Office, they act very weirdly in these situations, because once your term's over, they don't like it if politicians interfere and sort of say, well, no, we still wanted to stay there, because they will have got their person that they want to put in. Well, some great questions in the first half an hour. We will come back to more of them in just a moment here on Cross Question. It's 8:31. News headlines from Daryl Jackson.
Kamala Harris will address her supporters within the next hour for the first time since conceding defeat to Donald Trump in the US presidential election. She's spoken with the president-elect and says she will work with Joe Biden to ensure a peaceful transfer of power. Well, Mr. Trump's won 5 key swing states, with 2 still waiting to declare a result. He's told his supporters he would fix everything and help the country heal. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has spoken with the Republican leader and congratulated him on his win. And German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has confirmed within the last few minutes he's sacked his finance minister. It comes after weeks of wrangling over the future of the economic direction of the government. LBC weather, some showers tonight, but mainly dry in the north and a low of 5 degrees.
This is LBC.
Details.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:33. We've just thought of a good quiz question for you. Who is the only other American president in history to have won an election, served for 4 years, lost an election, and then won another one, like Donald Trump has done? There's only been one in American history. 84850. I'll read out the first name that texts in the correct answer. Right, we have with us Bonnie Greer, the playwright and author, Lionel Barber, journalist and host of the Media Confidential podcast, and Matthew McGregor, former advisor to Barack Obama. Now, you were advising on digital stuff, weren't you?
I ran the Digital Rapid Response team in 2012, so my team's job was basically to talk about Mitt Romney all day, every day.
And some say you swung it for Obama.
I don't think that's true. I don't think campaigns can do that.
You can claim
was a small cog in the wheel, but I do think that we changed people's perception of Mitt Romney, and that played its part.
The dog on the roof was the one that did it for me.
We had coffee mugs with "My dog rides inside" on
the packets of women.
I thought I could never vote for someone who put their dog on the roof rack. That told me an awful lot.
A strange guy, but also a fundamentally decent human being.
Yeah,
who stood up to Donald Trump.
Yes, he did.
Right, Tony is in Maidstone. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Ian. Hello, panel.
Hello, Tony.
Hi.
Hello. Now, I'm going to ask the question. I think men had a lot to do with this vote in this election. I think heterosexual men. I'm homosexual. That's not a controversial thing to say. Anyway, I need to ask your opinion. how much do you think misogyny had an effect on the US election result for Trump?
Before we go, we've had loads of people telling us it was Grover Cleveland who was the president in question. Tricia in Edinburgh was the first. You win the prize. Actually, there isn't a prize. The prize is listening to Bonnie's next answer. So, Bonnie, how much do you think the result was down to misogyny?
Tony, I'm going to say something that's really very painful to say for me, and especially being a feminist. I think women came out and voted for him in spite of what he said. It's the only way it could have happened. The average voter or the typical voter in the United States is a woman. I think women came out, I think they lied to whatever, and they came out and voted for him. It's as simple as that.
His female vote went up by 2%.
Absolutely. It's women. And, we can talk about the fact that it's like very weird. Almost every country on earth has had someone, a woman leading them or in position of power, except the United States. I think it was women.
And Matthew, when you look at certainly the last week of the campaign where Kamala Harris was concentrating on abortion, reproductive rights, etc., and you thought, well, if she can motivate women who really sort of were on her side on that to come out, she may do very well. But I think what everybody lost sight of was that there are many women who don't agree with her on abortion.
I think it's a divisive issue. Most people in the States do support abortion rights, as we've seen yesterday in the number of ballot initiatives, referendums that were held, I think 7 states, which passed new protections for abortion rights. When people had a single issue choice, they voted for reproductive rights. But the key thing is that for a lot of people, for a majority of people, Donald Trump's misogyny, his treatment of women, his his conviction for sexual assault weren't deal breakers. They might not have been the reason why people voted for Donald Trump, but they didn't stop them from voting for Donald Trump. And I think that's a really serious concern. I share Bonnie's pain. I think there's particularly something to look at amongst young men, a grievance that young men have, a growing, especially spread online, anti-feminism that is driving Gen Z men away from progressive values that younger women have and millennial men and women have. And that's something that I think we see in Europe as well, and it should be a real concern.
Lionel Barber.
Look, it was always going to be a mountain to climb for a woman candidate, also of colour, I have to say. They've never had a woman in the 240 years of the Republic make it to the White House. Also, Kamala Harris only had barely 4 months to get her campaign together to win. I think it was a mistake.
100-something days.
Yeah, it was a very short, it was a sprint, not a marathon. I think that there were other issues which were much more important than abortion rights: inflation, border security, immigration. These were the cutting-edge issues. Now, when you talk about male and women voting for Donald Trump, I think they look past the misogyny, his criminal record, his character, and they just saw, in a time of trouble, uncertainty, insecurity, they went with what they knew.
And also, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, Matthew, both pretty unimpressive candidates, actually. If you're going to have your first female candidate, you really ought to have made sure that it was somebody of real quality, electoral appeal and substance.
Kamala Harris was not a great candidate in the sense that she didn't win, I'll grant you that. But I think that putting this result on Kamala Harris or her campaign misses a broader point. This is an election, the famous slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." People felt worse off now than they did 4 years ago. It's actually why Donald Trump lost 4 years ago. In their pockets at work, in their standard of living, people felt poorer. And that is always going to hurt incumbents. And we've seen that not just in America, but around the rest of the world. Incumbents who preside over a cost of living crisis are likely to lose office.
I got to say this. I'll do it really fast. Hillary Clinton was arguably one of the most qualified people to run for the presidency in the history of the presidency.
With no electoral
on the paper.
appeal, though.
Yeah, but on the paper, you're right, but on paper. Kamala Harris, the same thing. The problem and the issue is that Americans are not ready to elect a woman as commander-in-chief, and that includes women. At the end of the day, what America's concerned with is protection. Protect us in our little ocean borders from sea to shining sea. Whoever can do that, that's who we're going to elect. And they couldn't see. I think she won an exceptionally wonderful campaign, and so did Hillary. It's the fact that when it came down to who's going to sit in the situation room, they can't see a woman in it, and that goes for women too.
I hate to disagree with three dual nationals about this, but I think if Nikki Haley had been the candidate, I think it might have been for the Republicans against Kamala Harris. I mean, okay, you'd have had two women then, so maybe it's an unfair comparison. But I think that there are plenty of qualified women out there who would have far more electoral appeal than Kamala Harris was ever going to have. I mean, I don't know whether you agree with this. I mean, just put this to you, Lionel. I think this has knocked back the cause of a woman becoming president for many years. Now, I don't think I will live to see one.
I'm not sure about that.
Me too.
I agree profoundly with what Bonnie said about it being a big hill to climb to see a woman become commander-in-chief. But I do think also that Kamala Harris wasn't the right candidate. And I think the Democrats have a real problem with what's loosely called wokeism, woke culture, being equivocating on trans rights, all this stuff, that these cultural issues really hurt the Democrats on top of the economic issues.
It's interesting, the first trans woman elected to the House of Representatives yesterday. Which you might not have thought that would happen for many, many years.
Well, she's in the House of Representatives. She'll be there for 2 years, okay? I mean, people, I'm not knocking that, but that's where she'll be. The President of the United States is different. Kamala was a fine candidate. She's as fine as Donald Trump is. At least she's not a felon. But see, this is the issue, and people don't want to face the fact that a lot of this is racist, and I hate to go there, but it is. Mm-hmm. And a lot of black women in America right now are sitting down and thinking about in some ways, what is our place in the hierarchy of things, and not just black women, women
I would
of color.
bet you money that if Michelle Obama had been the candidate, she'd have won.
Michelle ain't crazy. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. I wouldn't have done it, and neither would Michelle.
Right, let's take another question. Tony, thank you for that. Actually, before we do, Michael says, tonight's cross question is like CNN on steroids. Well, Bonnie and I used to be on a programme on CNN Talk, which is a very similar format.
Exactly.
But the reason that we haven't got somebody maybe with the right Trump credentials is because, unfortunately, she had to drop out at very short notice, leaving us no time to replace her. But Lionel has become a little bit Trumpy this evening.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not inhaling.
Thank goodness for that.
Exactly.
Right. Let's go to a text question from Gordon in Hampstead. Trump is now only... Actually, goes back to Grover Cleveland. Mm. Trump is now only the second president to lose power and then win it back at the following election, following on from Grover Cleveland, who won in 1884, lost in 1888, and then won again in 1892. At the end of his second term, he was deeply unpopular, even with his own party. Is this the likely fate of Trump and his second term, Matthew?
He was also very ill at the end of his second term, extremely ill. So not making any predictions about Donald Trump there. I think I go back to something that I saw in 2011 when I joined the Obama campaign. We spent a lot of time looking at focus groups, and one that's really stuck with me was a man who voted for Obama in 2008 and then for a Tea Party candidate in 2010. Mm-hmm. We wanted to understand why. And he said, all I've wanted from my life is to have a good job so I can own my own home and send my two girls to college. Because of the crash, I've lost my job, I've lost my home, and I've lost my college fund. And I will keep voting to fire people until my life gets better. If Donald Trump has not dramatically improved people's standards of living at the end of his second term, he will be unpopular, because at the end of the day, it comes back to whether people feel better off or not, and not better off in charts and graphs, but better off in their guts. And that's one of the things that the Harris campaign really struggled with during the course of the summer, was seeking to persuade people that something they didn't feel was true. Feelings don't care about your facts. The economy hurt people to the extent they wanted to fire whoever was in charge.
And Kamala's campaign was Joe's campaign. She was the extension of Joe. And she never actually repudiated him, and I don't blame her. I don't blame her for that, because I think she's a loyal person. But Kamala's was Joe, and that's how people saw it, and she couldn't answer the questions that they needed to answer.
What about the question about, is Trump going to be very unpopular like Grover Cleveland at the end of his second term, do you think?
It was long before that. Long before the end of that.
It all depends on how the economy goes. If the stock market goes down, that's what he really cares
The
about.
economy at the moment in America is actually doing quite well, and yet people aren't feeling it.
It is, but that's the inflation problem at the lower end. Just in case we have this CNN slander, I want to say one thing which we haven't addressed, but which is incredibly important about the Trump win. It's decisive. He didn't just win the Electoral College, he won the popular vote.
By a mile.
By a mile, Ian. Now, that's significant for two reasons. First, there is no way that anybody can challenge this. He has a decisive mandate. The Senate has gone Republican too. Maybe the House remains Republican. So it could be a clean sweep. There is no way that this can be open to political challenge. Second, all the talk about the hundreds of lawyers in both sides who are going to delay the election result being declared could take 10 days, whatever. Really dangerous uncertainty, mischief making amongst foreign powers. None of this has happened. And Kamala Harris congratulated Donald Trump tonight and said, well, so there's going to be a peaceful transfer of power. This is very important for America's standing.
In about 13 minutes, she is due to address the American people, and we will bring that to you live on LBC. I suspect it'll be late, because these things always are. But we'll continue taking your calls in just a few moments' time. It's 8:47.
This is LBC. Home. Cross Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:49. Bonnie Greer, Lionel Barber and Matthew McGregor with us. Anthony is in Ashford. Hello, Anthony.
Hello, Ian. Hello to your panel. My question is, does the return of the Donald spell the return of Boris Johnson?
Just when you thought it was safe. Lionel.
In his dreams. It's a little harder for the Conservative MPs to mount a challenge to the current leader. And Kemi Badenoch has just come in, please.
Yeah, give her a shot.
So I don't think so.
Well, you can imagine circumstances where it could happen. If she proves to be a disaster, say then Robert Jenrick comes in and he proves to be a disaster, and then there's a by-election, and Labour are really unpopular, you can absolutely imagine circumstances where it could happen.
But their hair is the same. The look would just be, not that great.
Yeah, obviously he hopes. He was thinking about becoming the sort of British Charles de Gaulle, but now it really will be the British Donald Trump.
I don't think he can afford the gigantic pay cut that would be required.
But the power, the glory, the power and the glory. It would be wonderful. Those two on the world stage, what a horrible thought.
And also, by the way, he's young enough. If Donald Trump can get into the White House second time round at 78...
Well, he's 60, and so, let's say he'd be 63, 64. That used to be the age when people normally became Prime Minister in this country.
And that was old and back in the day, yeah.
A little bit of very sad breaking news. John Nott, who was the Defence Secretary at the time of the Falklands War, he has sadly passed away. Now, he was the last living National Liberal MP. He was Thatcher's first Trade Secretary and then became Defence Secretary. And do you remember, those of you of an older generation will remember the retaking of South Georgia when John Nott and Margaret Thatcher appeared in Downing Street, and it was completely dark. And she insisted that John Nott should make the statement about retaking South Georgia, which he ended with the words, "God save the Queen." They went to go back into Downing Street. Journalists kept shouting questions, and Margaret Thatcher turned round and said, "Rejoice, just rejoice at that news." So John Nott, I think, was a very significant figure. I published his memoirs back in, I think, 2002 to mark the 20th anniversary of the Falklands War, and I had a devil of a job to persuade him to call the book Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, because that's what Sir Robin Day called him in that famous interview where John Nott ripped off his microphone and walked out of the studio. And he took great exception to that, but I did persuade him to call it that, because he said, no, it's a bit humiliating. And I said, no, John, you've been out of politics for 20 years. Nobody knows who you are nowadays. You've got to trigger people's memories. And he got that. And I remember sitting in the reception of the St James's Court Hotel on Buckingham Gate, going through the publishing contract with him, and he queried literally every line in the contract. And at the end of it, and it was at least 2 hours, I said to him, "Do you realise I haven't agreed to any changes that you suggested?" He goes, "No, but it's been good fun, hasn't it?" And he was a bit like Donald Trump. He liked the deal.
Yeah.
So I'm really sad. I went to visit him. He had a farm in St Ives in Cornwall, and his wife was... if I say Serbian, I'm going to get this wrong, but she was from that area, Miloška. Absolutely wonderful woman, and a huge charity fundraiser too. And of course, his daughter was Sasha Swire, who wrote those famous diaries. Her husband is Lord Swire, Hugo Swire. So I want to send my condolences to the whole family, because he was just such a great man. Really, I've got many fond memories of him. Right, let's go to Anthony in Ashford. Anthony, hi, what would you like to ask?
Well, I just asked you, Ian, but if I might just make a slight point.
Oh, no, we've done you, haven't we?
Anthony.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going delirious now. What you wanted to add something, did you say?
Yeah, I do think Johnson will be looking at this, because he's thinking if Trump can get here, well, Trump did get the evangelicals, don't forget. Don't forget there's a network that pumps out, it's like songs of praise of politics. It's called SPN, and he got Jimmy Swaggart and the Swaggarts, and they're pumping out this, in America.
Which, given his own personal morals, I never quite understood, but there we are. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, a WhatsApp question from Kieran in Derry. Is there any possibility that Trump could seek to change the US Constitution to try to serve a third term from 2028?
Nope.
And I'm going to add a bit here, if he did, who would win in a Trump versus Barack Obama contest in 2028? Because Trump would be 82 and Obama would only be 67. Well, fascinating. I think I need to do another book of counterfactuals. Matthew?
No is the answer to the question about changing the Constitution. It's pretty straightforward. It's incredibly difficult to do. There's a reason it hasn't been done in decades. But the more fun question of Trump versus Barack Obama, I mean, you know what I'm going to say because I'm obviously biased. Barack Obama is an incredible political talent, and I think would wipe the floor with Trump, who is already showing signs of decline at the beginning of his second term.
Bonnie?
Agree. You can't change the United States Constitution. It's very difficult. However, there are loopholes.
Why is it? You have to have 2/3 of the Senate, do you?
You have to have the constitutional conventions, and each of the states have to meet. It would take forever. Unless, and I'm writing a play about this, you find loopholes, and there are in the United States Constitution. However, then it would have to be changed before Obama could do it, because Obama cannot run again as president of the United States unless the Constitution is changed. He's had 2 terms.
Well, we agree. It is very difficult, and you've got to get, isn't it, 4/5 of the states?
You have to get a convention, 4/5 of the state. I mean,
exactly.
Trump would be.
But there have been 20-odd amendments over the years, haven't there?
But you still have to go through that same process.
No, but it's not impossible to do. That's all I'm saying.
Not for decades.
Yeah,
not in decades. And it is true that they, by the way, it went in the other direction after Franklin Roosevelt, because he served 3.5 terms, and then they said, okay, it's 2. So I don't see this. Even though King Donald may think he's a monarch, if not a dictator, he's not going to be allowed to be a king.
He's going to give it a try, though. He's going to try something, because he's got the Heritage Foundation behind him. These guys are working 24/7 on how to do this. So.
I would look at more things like, what's he going to do with the Fed? Is he going to try and undermine
Exactly, and the Department of Education and all of that. That's where he's going to go.
Right, just a reminder that Kamala Harris is due to address the American people at 9 o'clock. We'll bring that to you live. As I say, these things often drift, but we will bring you that whenever it happens. Now, our fun question, which today, unusually, I haven't warned the panel about because we were gossiping too much in the break. Tim is in Manchester, and he says, there's speculation that both Elon Musk and Robert Kennedy, who was previously a lawyer, will get roles in Trump's second administration. Which famous non-politician would you want running things alongside you, and why? Now, in this, just to give you a few moments to think about this, in this country, having non-politicians involved in government invariably hasn't really worked. I remember back in the 1970s, Ted Heath and Margaret Thatcher had a couple of business people involved. That didn't work. Gordon Brown had the government of all the talents. Not quite sure many of them lasted the course either. But of course, you've now got Lord Timpson, runs Timpson's and Locksmiths. He's now running prisons. So there is precedent for this sort of thing. So Lionel Barber, who would you want alongside you?
Well, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, I think he's a brilliant businessman. He knows about good failure and bad failure. I'd have him any day. And by the way, just to challenge you, David Young, businessman,
That's
great
true. That is
minister
true.
for Margaret Thatcher, helped push privatisation of British Telecom. It does work sometimes.
He was the one that brought her solutions, not problems, I seem to remember. Bonnie?
I've never thought about this before, but whoever manages Taylor Swift, I think I would like them to be next to me, or Beyonce. I think that's the person.
They didn't do much for Kamala, did they?
No, but I still like them there. They fill stadiums.
Matthew?
There's an easy one for me. I'm from Norwich. I'm a huge Norwich City fan. I'd want Delia Smith in government. I think she's a fantastic person, good heart, and has the recipe for the solutions we need.
The recipe, Phil, boom, boom. I didn't know you were from Norwich. That guarantees you an invite back. Well, look, thank you very much indeed for coming in today, and we'll have another cross question ready for you on Monday, not based on the US election. Now, coming up in the next hour, we're going to continue the conversation, take more of your calls on your reaction to Donald Trump's victory. I want to maybe widen it out a little bit to talk about the defence implications, particularly with regard to Ukraine. We'll be talking to the Liberal Democrat MP for Tunbridge Wells, Mike Martin, served in the army himself, and of course my nemesis from back back on the general election campaign. I haven't ever met him before, so that's going to be an interesting encounter. You won't want to miss that. That'll be around 9:30. So, as I say, Kamala Harris about to speak. We'll bring that to you in just a few moments' time here on LBC.
On your radio, on Global Player,